I'm going to talk about this the other end, is that people become homeless or they lose their homes and have to move way out to the outer borough somewhere. So, what happens, this is the question you have to ask too, what happens when the rent is privatized instead of going into the public coffers for the commons that we all appreciate? So who's left out in the cold? And, when I saw this guy's picture, I thought, well, maybe he's sitting on the bottom of the 157, but I don't think they would allow that, so probably not. So what happens when the rent is privatized? As it turns out, there are more than enough vacant apartments and abandoned buildings to house all the street homeless persons, including 1/3 of whom are children, in the city. So citywide, underutilized vacant property can house the entire city shelter population 5 times over at a cheaper cost than what the city is paying now for city-supported housing programs. So now, according to Picture the Homeless, which did a study with Hunter College, in 2005, New York City spent $709 million to provide shelter to an average shelter population of 34,000 a night. Many city policies encourage landlords to keep their buildings empty. As neighborhoods gentrify, many speculating landlords choose to keep buildings empty so that they can rent them at a future date and charge far higher rents. Well, this is warehousing. So they said that the total number of homeless families in their study was 40,000, the number of vacant buildings was 3,500, and the number of vacant lots was almost 2,500. And that was the potential to house 200,000 people, which obviously is more than 34,000 by a good stretch. And they only surveyed about 1/3 of the city, and they undercounted the vacant lots by about 10 times. So this was from a 2012 follow-up study to 2005. But it's gotten even worse, because they said in 2005, 34,000 night. Well, I looked it up, and as of April 2014, 54,667 people on average stay nightly in city shelters. So it's gone up dramatically, and in fact it's gone up 75% since 2002. And now it's costing more than $800 million a year, according to the Coalition for the Homeless and the magazine DNA Info. So, I mean, this is crazy. So we've got, on the one hand, these super big spires of billionaires who pay incredible sums, don't go to the city. On the other hand, they can't shelter 50,000 people or 55,000 people a night in a number that's growing when there's vacant property and usable property that could do so. That's being warehoused because there's no real incentive for the owners of those properties to use them. Okay, so why is this being done? It's getting almost to the end of this section. So why can't we build our way out of this mess? I gave this presentation in the fall, and somebody said, well, how come the free market doesn't take care of it? Why don't we just let them go? Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a free market. I mean, as you can see, there's all kinds of incentives to build certain kind of buildings and not others, and to warehouse certain kind of buildings. So it ought to be clear by now, we can't just let the market decide. But there was an article in The Nation magazine that said, quote, "It is not enough to simply build more market rate housing in hopes of supplying more than the demand," wrote the authors of the housing chapter of Toward a 21st Century City for All. From 2000 to 2010, New York's housing supply grew at more than twice the rate of the city's population. If we could build our way out of our affordability crisis, costs and rents would have gone down, yet, as the authors point out, they did not. From the days of Henry George, in the 19th century, New York's progressive politicians have tried to recapture the vast and totally unearned income created by the rise in land values, but none have succeeded. Even today, when projects like the Hudson Yards and Number 7 subway extension, which we saw, prompt huge increases in values, only a tiny portion ends up in the city coffers. And this was from an article that Bill de Blasio can learn from New York City's last radical mayor. They were talking about LaGuardia in The Nation magazine.
Who was the last radical mayor?
They were talking about Fiorello, LaGuardia, and all friends. So I don't want to make it sound like the city is not collecting anything from the land they are. They're collecting $20 billion projected in 2015 in property tax revenue. So even with all the exemptions under assessment tax breaks, the city is collecting more property tax more property tax revenue than ever, and construction is booming, but it's mostly booming in the high end, as we've seen. Hudson Yards and then 157, all of these buildings are booming. So why then is living in New York City so expensive and even unaffordable? Well, in addition to all the things that we've seen, what about the other costs? If taxes and costs as a percentage of income are so much higher for the middle and working classes, is it surprising that it's so hard for them to afford to live here? Well, what are these other taxes? So we've got 18 this may be a little bit dated, but basically it's 18.1% of the city's tax revenue comes out of land values, but 24% comes out of building values, so it's more than half of the total property tax, because remember, the property tax is two taxes. It's a tax on land and a tax on buildings. So we're taxing the buildings more than the land, which actually acts as a disincentive. It discourages building. Then we get 19.4% is personal income tax. That's going into the tax revenue. 13% of that tax revenue is from general sales. And then there's other little taxes which add up to 25%. And all of these discourage either working buying or everything else that's taxed. The only thing that encourages building and development and efficient use is the land value tax. So we say, as Georgia's, let's have a single tax on land. So this is not the way to ensure a sensible, progressive economic development, a greener city, and full employment. So what would be the effect, this is a question for you, what would be the effect of a tax policy that incentivized development and production and disincentivized hoarding and speculating on land? At current assessments and rates, land values account for just 18, well, we already got that, so we know what the equation is. So now, can anybody read this Henry George quote? I'm going to ask for a volunteer again, otherwise I'll pick somebody. All right,
The tax upon land values is the most just and equal of taxes. It falls only on those who receive from society a peculiar and valuable benefit, and upon them in proportion to the benefit they receive. It is the taking of the community for the use of the community, of that value which is the creation of the community. When all rent is taken by taxation for the needs of the community, the equality that is ordained by nature will be attained. No citizen will have an advantage over any other citizen except what is given by his industry, skill, and intelligence, and each will obtain what he fairly earns.
Good. So that was Henry George writing Progress and Poverty in 1879. Things have not changed, as we see. So what can we do to return the land rent to the community, and who are our allies in this quest? We actually do have allies. So it's not that we are out here by ourselves. We have support in the national media. This was an article in Rolling Stone magazine, which I won't read, but it was by Jesse Meyerson, and this generated over 10,000 comments. That was a few months ago, so it's probably much more now. But he basically came out for a land value tax, and he described how landlords don't really do anything to earn their money, but they charge us anyway. And so the way to encourage more development is to have a land value tax. So there you are in a mainstream magazine that's not particularly oriented toward real estate, saying one of the 5 things that millennials should be fighting for, which is their target audience, is a land value tax. So there's national support. We have support in the local media, in Bloomberg magazine, Hudson Yards Watch, said as expected, a city agency approved a 20-year, $328 million tax break for related companies, Hudson Yards mega project, and they go on to criticize it if you read the article. And then in the New York Daily News, they talked about that 157, and this is another thing, this 421A abatement, which basically is supposed to allow wealthy developers to develop affordable housing somewhere else to offset their tax breaks. It's kind of another scam because, number one, it's not that affordable. It turns out you have to have an average of $80,000 income in a household to afford this affordable housing. and then it's not really available. There's still a big waiting list, so there's not that much being built. And meanwhile, the tax breaks that they get for this are enormous. So, you know, de Blasio wants to build all of this. He wants to build 200,000 units of affordable housing, and basically he's asking for, I think, $46 billion over 10 years to do so. And right there, we see he doesn't have to ask for a penny. He just has to charge the land rent. So they said in 2008 that there was going to be a change in the 421A policy in this last paragraph, but it didn't really happen. So we're still stuck with this policy, and it's still ripping the taxpayer off. Now we also have support from the former comptroller, Scott Stringer, former borough president. When he was writing in 2007, he said in his report, Transforming Vacant Lots to All Construction Sites, quote, unfinished construction sites and vacant properties litter New York City, leaving neighborhoods in flux and reducing our quality of life. In 2007, Borough President Springer published No Vacancy, the role of underutilized properties in meeting Manhattan's affordable housing needs. The report found that in Manhattan, 74% of vacant residential buildings and 71% of all vacant lots are located above 96th Street. Additionally, more than $100 million a year was being lost because vacant lots above 110th Street were taxed as Class 1 residential properties, and I'll talk about the classes in a little bit. And Borough President Stringer issued a series of recommendations, including advocating for legislation to reform tax policy to spur development of vacant property and prioritize affordable housing. And we did get one of these bills passed. Governor Patterson at that time signed a bill offered by Assembly members Herman Farrell and State Senator Jose Serrano, known as the Serrano Bill, that amended the property tax, equalizing the treatment of vacant land throughout Manhattan by taxing all vacant land as Class 4 property. And although we haven't got exact studies, Serrano thinks that this did encourage development in Harlem, which is one reason we're seeing a building boom up there at this point.
So they promote the increase of...
Yeah, they discourage the hoarding of vacant land and promote development instead. And Bill de Blasio is actually on board about this. He understands this, and he wrote in his publication, this the second of 8 recommendations in the Foundation for an Affordable City, create new development opportunities by unlocking the potential of vacant buildings, lots, and accessory units. And then when he got elected, there was an article in Cranes that de Blasio tells lot owners to put up or pay up. That was the name of the article. And Mayor de Blasio bid to close a tax loophole could force landlords to build new housing on their vacant plots or sell out to those who will. If carried out, the idea would affect more than 10,500 lots in 5 boroughs to hike yearly rates by an average of $15,300 and generate $162 million per year. So the question is, as activists or people who want to see Georgism in the real world, how can we encourage Scott Stringer and Mayor de Blasio to live up to their campaign promises? And that's part of what we do in Common Ground, is we try to...
And both of them are in office. Both of them are in office now. I mean,
both of them are office, yeah.
once
So
we
we
get the
have
controller,
a rare opportunity, yeah. So
But-
if we can't get it now, we probably can't get it at all. Question?
The new commissioner of NYSHA is talking about using public land for private development in order to increase the revenues into NYSHA. There was a
Oh, yeah,
report,
the plazas and things like that.
right,
Yeah.
there was a report, I believe, on Al Jazeera about the Queensbridge projects,
Yeah.
how that has become choice real estate
Mhm.
in terms of trying to privatize public housing. For example, Columbia has been trying to do it to those the projects on the east side of Broadway, as they're now expanding from 125th Street to 134th Street,
Yeah.
under the guise of private development on land where you have public housing projects.
Yeah, you know, these public-private partnerships, I'm a little suspicious of them because the track record isn't very good. It tends to be publicly funded and privately
Private
gained,
gain.
private gains. So, you know, and it's going to, you know, crowd out the plazas and the gardens and the things that make these public housing projects so,
Also, the population
tolerable.
that's on fixed income.
Yeah, Yeah, and everybody who's living there is obviously on a fixed income or low income. And I just think, you know, this is a stepping stone to making the rents go higher and forcing the people
As
out.
they did to those buildings with 3333 Broadway, they totally, that was subsidized housing.
Yeah.
And it hit the free market, and now, of course, everybody had to move out. That's all part of Columbia's part to redevelop that.
Yeah, Morningside Heights is.
Yeah, right.
They
Go into the river.
And now Salvation Army's doing something similar too.
I'm a little bit confused. If this, these houses that he's talking about were rent stabilized, how did they get these people off rent stabilization and put them onto market rent?
You want to answer?
I think if rent stabilized, if the rent hits a certain amount of,
Yeah.
a certain,
Was it 2,000, 2,500?
right, whatever it is, and thank God we still have, we have SCREE and the income qualification, I think went up to 50,000, maybe not even high from 24,000.
It's something.
And also the fact that in New York State, we still have the best tenant protection laws on the books. As I said, 1994, we scored people from rent stabilized to rent control together and help protect, to maintain those laws.
Yeah. Well, all right, I'm almost done, so let's see if we.
Also, just on this issue, another common technique that most people don't realize is that every year the landlords try to make some like menial improvements to justify a small 3 or 4% jacking up of the rent. Now, if you do that over like a period of 20 years, I have a friend right here next to me, and now she uses an establishment and she almost pays market value.
Yeah.
She pays like 2,100 for her like rental.
Right.
In
Eventually
40
you
years, that's eventually
pass
going to
the
catch up
limit.
with you.
And you get past the limit, then you go out of stabilization.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so New York City Bar Association is also supporting this. I wouldn't think they would take notice, but they do. It said on page 67 of the New York City Bar Association policy recommendations for New York City's next mayor, they conclude the city taxes land and improvements to the property using the same rates and method. This may be counterproductive, as taxing improvements to a property may discourage investment in that property. For example, landlords may permit residential buildings to deteriorate rather than maintain and improve the buildings, thus contributing to the deterioration of neighborhoods and negatively affecting the quality of life for the families and neighborhoods involved. Other municipalities have contemplated and or experimented with the two-rate or split-rate property tax reform. Over the long term, the lower rate on the buildings and structures has the potential to encourage economic development, increase available housing, and rejuvenate blighted neighborhoods while discouraging absentee owners, landowners from foregoing improvements. This approach should be considered as part of a property tax review. So they're squarely for land value tax. You can't get much clearer than that. And then the Progressive Caucus, in their 13 bold progressive ideas, says conduct an annual survey of vacant units and put them into productive use as affordable housing. And that's actually one of the bills on this slide that we were trying to get passed in common. As a matter of fact, one of them did pass. There are 4 bills here. And the Serrano bill, which I talked about before, did pass to admit the huge tax break above 110th Street for vacant underutilized sites. The 3 other bills were tabled, so that, you know, there were 2 assembly bills and 2 complementary city council bills. So that the second assembly bill that was tabled was supposed to augment and enforce and strengthen the bill that was passed. So since we only got one, we didn't quite get the incentive to build that we would have got if we had both, but still, we did get one bill passed in 2008 to admit the tax break, and we're trying, you know, in our organization, we've been to Lynn Rosenthal 3 times, because she was the sponsor of that assembly bill, to try to get her to reintroduce it. And then the city council, we're trying to get them somebody to reintroduce that too. And I actually have a lot of sponsors, but it didn't pass, and I think you can guess why. Okay, so that's one thing. There are other land reform bills too. So, you know, we have to be a little bit flexible. If something comes along that's sort of approximate, it might pay to get behind that because we can't always get exactly what we want. So these 3 bills are from Assemblymember Dan Court. And one is an act to amend the real property tax law in relation to requiring assessment disclosure notices in New York City to include a description of the method of assessment. So this way you know how your property is being assessed and what the criteria are. So we're trying to get that passed. And another bill to amend the administrative code in relation to requiring assessment rolls to be published on the Department of Finance website. Well, the Department of Finance is the one that maintains all of the assessment information, real estate information, and so that would be the place to look for the assessment rolls.
That is public though, that is accessible.
They're trying to get a bill to get the assessment rolls themselves to be published. There is assessment information in a general sense, but it's not specific in the way that this bill would make it. So, okay, it's complicated. And then the last one is an act to amend the administrative code of the City of New York to require real property to be assessed using a fair comparative. Well, this goes back to 157. And so when you have a building like 157 and that's compared to, say, a building across the street, which is 60 stories and 40 years old, and doesn't have all the amenities, it's not comparable. It may be in the same area, but it's not a comparable building. So now, this is a little bit tricky because, as a Georgist, we say build whatever you want, we don't want to tax improvements. But the problem is that we've got so many, so much of the tax is taken away from the land that now only the building is being taxed. So if you want to be at least fair within the system that we've got, at least tax the buildings comparably. Don't make it so that you've got an enormous amenity-filled building which is so undertaxed that in addition to not being taxed on the land, not taxing the building either. It's a compromise, it is. But they asked Common Ground to do a memorandum of support, and we did, and that was included in the record for this bill to pass. And there's now in fact, I think in May they were trying to get it passed. It didn't pass yet, but we're still working on it. All right, and another thing, a couple of other things, almost done. A few other things we can do is to place a higher tax on vacant land. Well, we talked about that. And there's 28,613 vacant lots, 9,700 acres, and the effective tax rate on their listed value is less than 1%, but they sell for almost 4 times the listed market value. Well, we talked about specific examples of that, but this is the general case for the city, so we're undertaxing by 4 times basically. Another thing we can do is shift the class 1, which is basically 1 to 3 family buildings. We can shift the property tax off of buildings and onto land by exempting the median value of the class 1 building. In other words, you take the median value and you exempt it from the building, so they're not taxed on that amount of the value of the building up to the median amount. And then that way you would shift more taxes onto land because you're taking some off the building. So by default, it goes on land. So you collect the same revenue from the resulting taxable value, which will shift more tax onto land, and this penalizes underuse and speculation and provides a tax break for responsible homeowners. And the third thing we can try is to reform the assessments in classes 2 and 4 to assess real estate values by comparable sales, and we talked about that, not by income streams. And we could use the building residual method, which Michael Hudson defines as it starts by valuing the land, leaving the difference between the land price and the property's market value to represent the building. So in other words, you start with the land, and whatever is left after that is the building value. So basically, the land becomes the majority of it. And you can assess condos as real estate assets, not as apartments. Which would be getting rid of the interest deduction probably, but that's pretty radical. You can offset the reduction in income from commercial occupancy and other taxes with offset reductions in income, commercial occupancy, and other taxes with the land value tax, on which shift more to land value tax. And then we have a couple of, actually one long-term transition proposal which came out of California originally, They had a ballot initiative which unfortunately got stalled because the person who was sponsoring it stopped maintaining the website, but it is actually in the archive. So they were trying to shift taxes onto land entirely and get rid of all other taxes. And he worked it out so that, they had several examples of what people would pay. And they've got Proposition 13, which basically ruined California. So we have to get past that because that is just, it's killing their revenue base and it's making it very cyclical. So we tried to do the same thing for New York, but we ran up against some bad assessments that make it difficult to calculate what we have to raise and how much we have to tax. But we did make some progress, and maybe we'll get back to that. Okay, so finally, the handout that I gave you, so you don't have to take all these notes, includes on the second bullet point where you can get the slideshow. I realize that there's a lot of information tonight, so I don't expect that it's going to be all absorbed at once. But I'm trying to show you the general case and how these tax discrepancies and inequalities have hurt everybody, except the rich landowner. And so these are some good sites to look for. But the second one is the one that has the slideshow. And our first one, the first site is our Common Ground website, and then the Facebook site is up there as well. And that is it. I'm done. So, Q&A time, right? And an hour for Q&A.
Okay, moving on time. I don't think, well, do you want to handle some
I'm
comments,
ready for
questions? I think right now is the time to do it.
I know there was a lot of materials. So.
Do you have any tips for suggestion to change this kind of?
Well, the things at the end, the bills that we're trying to get passed, and the fact that we have a mayor now and a comptroller are both in favor of it, and the New York City Bar Association and so on. I think we're actually primed it more than we ever have been in the time since Henry George. If we can't get it now, I don't know what it is.
We'll have to wait another 100 years.
It'll change.
It's a rare confluence of ideas and personalities. Yeah.
It's interesting, in the 70s, a Marxist economist, Thomas Vietoris, in the school wrote a book, The Economic Development of Parliament. And in that book, he talked about the social costs, which did not even consider we so-called gentrifying areas. I look at an area like Washington Heights, which of course has greatly improved since the 70s. Uprooting of literally thousands and thousands of people into the Bronx along University Avenue. And now the same thing is being done to East Harlem. Of course, coming to Hunter College, the consortium of Mount Sinai, New York Presbyterian, the building of this huge public health facility, et cetera, again, which is causing the uprooting again of thousands and thousands of people, older people on fixed income. So the social costs are not factored in terms of increased visits to the ER, skyrocketing medical costs, placement in nursing homes, more 911 calls because of suicide ideation, suicide, abuse, etc., etc. So again, speaking now from the point of view of a healthcare professional, these are not included when we go into these plans to gentrify or develop an income.
Well,
And in both areas, you have
you know this,
population.
and the middle class knows this, and certainly the people you're talking about know this is happening. But the problem is, of course, there's money on the other side.
Definitely. So, of course, healthcare is buying into it by building these cities within cities. The fact that here in New York City, 3 large conglomerates, Montefiore in the Bronx, here in Manhattan, you have Mount Sinai, and New York Presbyterian, and NYU. It's incredible.
Well, none of them pay property tax.
Excuse me?
None of them pay any
No, they
property
don't. No, they
tax.
don't. No, they don't.
So they all
They're
are
advertising
exempt.
like mad on TV.
Yeah.
As if they're advertising a place to vacation instead of a place to go and get well.
Well, somebody said that NYU is really a real estate company that happens to teach on the site. So I think, that's
Not to
pretty
be outdone by
true.
its neighbor, by its competitor north of 96th Street. Columbia.
Speaking about, well, we talk about medical numbers and we have educational numbers. I mean, NYU is one of them, but Columbia is the same. And also, what about Bloomberg's gift in Roosevelt Island
Cornell.
to a foreign, well, not Cornell, it's a foreign university. You know, and they gave him how much as a land grant? About 100 million in land grant, and I wonder whether Cornell, and Technion, of course, I mean, it's an Israeli university that our mayor is sponsoring, without money, if they're going to offer any free classes to New York City taxpayers.
Probably not.
What else pretty expensive? Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, you know, people don't know this stuff and they think that the city is running out of space and that there's no place to live. They don't understand that there's 6% vacant land and that there's enough vacant housing to house all the homeless and plenty of the people who are fixed income as well. And that, you know, the incentives are all to build these luxury towers. And if you get these enormous abatements, then the city is starved of revenues as well. So, you know, that comes back to the income tax. So we have to make this up somewhere. Either we cut the service or we charge the higher income tax to people who are working. So, you know, all of these things go together. And it's up to us. I think that's what I was trying to show at the end. It's up to us as Georgists, and if we want to be activists and we want to take it to the next level, you have to contact your state senator, your assembly person, your city council member. You know, get them to understand this stuff. I'll go along with this. I've given presentations, and you know, I go to the community board meeting. That's another thing, community boards, and talk to your elected representatives.
But the city is guilty as the real estate. For example, they tore down a public high school on 57th Street and moved it over so they can put a high-rise building right on 3rd Avenue. And 57th.
And we know there's a shortage of school space.
Incredible.
That's,
And this is
kids
school
are
that
crowded
attracts
40 to a classroom.
the entire city,
Yeah.
a specialized high school.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our building is sold, so, I mean, if you have a better use for the specific land, you may as well move the school to another. There's no problem with trying to change the use of the land. So moving the school to put a high rise, that's not un-Georgist.
Yeah, I mean,
What is un-Georgist
But you need to educate
is
kids.
that you collect without, like the developers are going to collect without
Private collection of rent.
right. That's what the problem is.
Yeah. So if you have this private collection of rent, there's no revenue left to fund the schools. So now you can't build a school to replace the one you've torn down, and you start to crowd the kids into fewer and fewer
I
schools.
think it was even moved into a private building where they may be paying rent, I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, that's the charter schools are another topic for another night.
Oh, they're getting some rent abatements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fred.
I'm just having trouble with something he said back there. What's his name?
Andres.
Huh?
Andres.
Andres. Why don't universities and hospitals pay land tax? How
They're
is that?
exempt.
Why?
Not
Because nonprofits, hospitals, churches, universities,
They make a
all
profit, I
government
mean-
buildings.
But do they make a profit? I mean, they make farm money.
They make big salaries.
More than any other company.
Supposedly they
Person
make
who
profits.
run a non-profit, you need salaries.
big salary.
So they make big salaries from the tax abatements.
Right, but it must be, money left over for the tax, to pay
I
tax.
mean, they all have their reasons. I mean, the hospitals say we can't build these big sprawling hospitals unless we pay property tax. The universities say we can't build big sprawling universities, we pay property tax.
So what happens if people say, look, you're charging a tax, I gotta go across the river and pay less
Yeah.
land tax. What's something for other people from using that argument to get the land tax reduced?
I mean, if everybody paid the land value tax, we have a whole different revenue stream. It's true, but, you know, this goes back to Lincoln, I think, with the original land grant, or maybe Jefferson, with the original land grant to universities. You know, the country granted them wide swaths of land, and And that's continued to this day, even in the cities. It's something to bring up, but I'm not sure it would be the first thing we should fight for.
Just very quickly, Ms. Moskowitz was my city council rep. She has walked into a paradise of millions of dollars. And I heard the Koch brothers are funding a lot of those charter schools, that she's very much involved.
Well, the Koch brothers are not only funding them, but they're providing the curriculum.
The what?
They're providing the curriculum to
Oh.
teach. They've got the whole lesson plan about, free enterprise and libertarianism and so forth.
Well, the conflict of interest, that's
Not
what.
bad, if that's what they're promoting.
They're doing it, I would believe it.
Free enterprise,
But they're not really practicing what they preach, because they're getting led too.
And they influence young minds to think in a certain way that's favorable to the Koch brothers. That sounds like a conflict of interest to me.
And it's, I don't want to get into the Koch brothers. You can see the movie, there's a couple of movies on the Koch brothers, as a matter of fact. See that when you get your book on. Any other questions?
Going back to your question, this gentleman, I think if I'm trying to reinterpret your question, you really want to see something dramatically change, right?
I think it's a reframe my question. This still chance of putting on practice what Henry George said to long ago, but at this time, one tax property.
We have, as you saw, we have a mayor who's favorable. We have a comptroller, we have the Bar Association, the Progressive Caucus. We have several newspapers. And so, I mean, we're in a good position, actually, historically. I don't think we're in as good a position as when Henry George was alive, but next to that, we're probably pretty close. So I think, now is the time to act. And it's not like this is not done somewhere, because Harrisburg has a land value tax. They have a 6-to-1 ratio. In other words, they charge 6 times as much on the land as they do on the buildings. And the mayor of Harrisburg, who I listened to speak, he credits that for turning around his city within his 25-year tenure. So he came in when Harrisburg was the second worst city in the country, according to a national survey. East St. Louis was the worst. I was in Harrisburg after it got fixed up, and it looks very nice. Everything is cleaned up, the buildings are nice, the streets are paved, they've got a new island in the middle that has a park in it, and it's just nice. So, this works. And he credits the land value tax for turning around the city. So, he's been there, he was there 25 years. And so for him to say this is the one thing that did make a difference.
Was working.
Yeah, I mean, he made the speech, it was a keynote speech in the Council of Georgia's Organizations annual meeting, and he credited the land value tax for doing that. And we also had a version of it in Singapore and a little bit in Hong Kong where they apply property taxes. I mean, nothing is 100% pure, but we're closer to it there. And we had it in New York City as well.
Oh, I heard about that.
In the 1920s and early 30s, we had where you wouldn't tax after the first $5,000 in the building. You wouldn't tax the building anymore. So $5,000 back then was a lot of money. So, that was a good bit of money. So if you didn't tax above that, essentially you're forcing the tax back on the land. So we had a building boom, and it was actually a bigger building boom, even though it was the roaring 20s. It was bigger than the rest of the country. And it went into the early 30s, and we got the Empire State Building and all of that. But what happens is people forget the lessons, and then they kind of rescind the policy, and they want the land grabbers are always there. You have to constantly fight this. I mean, the land owners, they always want to get more of the pie. So they're always going to try and convince the politicians or bribe the politicians to do so. It was in Pittsburgh too. In Pittsburgh they had it until the year 2000. It was partly responsible for the Golden Triangle springing up and having all these new developments. And then they adjusted the property tax upwards so much that people screamed. And so then they went back to the old property tax. It wasn't on land, it was on buildings mostly. So now they don't have to develop it anymore. But it has worked wherever it's been tried.
I think we're doing something through the mass media, and also politicians trying to organize everything, also from the civil society. Besides that, I don't really see something that is going to change. If we have to go through extreme situations, we really have to change completely our economical system, and the society is going to be something different.
Well,
It's going to be a revolution. It's not going to happen.
I don't know, I mean, you know, how many people would it take to change a politician's mind on this? Like 10,000, 100,000? You know, but we don't have enough right now because people don't understand and they're not enthused enough. I admit it's a dry subject, it's a little bit arcane. You have to understand the tax policy, which is not everybody's favorite thing. But the fact is, this is a major overhaul of our standard of living and how we get revenues and how we live. If we don't do something like this, the middle class is going to be forced out. It's going to disappear.
Because we displace in the middle class.
It's going to be, you know, rich. It's going to be like Hong Kong or Dubai or some one of these cities that has all rich people and then a class of servants who aren't paying anything, and everybody else will be out. So,
As a matter of fact, Harlem 10 years ago was completely different than it is today. Yeah. Right now, you can pay that $1 million from the studio.
it's incredible. Well, I mean, a lot of this
That
is
doesn't mean displaced people, a lot of people, thousands.